mangled metal, dust, and cobwebs. This isn't how Audi's flagship supercar is supposed to look. Luckily, this R8 isn't gonna look this way much longer, and I couldn't be more excited about this rebuild. Well, mostly excited, a little bit terrified, and that's because this is the most expensive car that I've ever purchased. And it looks like this. Luckily, I have the perfect partner on this project. With more than 122 million parts and accessories available and the protection of eBay Guaranteed Fit, both you and I can find exactly what we need for virtually any project, even a rare trim model like my Audi R8 here. But first, I have to figure out exactly what I need for this. A hood, a bumper, both headlights, that's all on the surface and easy to identify. A little bit deeper, I have found that at least one of the 3 radiators at the front of this car is damaged in some way, and we are losing coolant, which means that we need to figure out how to get this thing up into the shop because I don't want to use the forklift like we normally do. I'll leave it up to you all to debate the practicality of using a 1,000 horsepower half an R8 to tow a 700 horsepower 3/4 of an R8, especially when we could have towed it with a truck or the forklift, or even just pushed it all the way up here. But it's inside now and we can get to work on this thing. I have 2 main concerns with this R8 rebuild. Obviously, the extent of the damage is first and foremost, and I want to ensure that there are no mechanical issues with this car. It is heavily modified. Obviously, there is a supercharger, but that is just the beginning of the laundry list of modifications that this R8 has. When it arrived, I went ahead and topped it off with coolant to do a little teaser in the Audi R8 salvage story earlier this year. All the water that I put in it promptly leaked out from one of the radiators that I already mentioned is broken. So I've heard this run and it sounds fine, but I want to make sure that it drives well. And we need to get that radiator fixed before we're able to do that. Now, as far as the damage at the front end here, to most people watching, all this probably looks pretty bad, but most of what I see here is easily replaceable. What my main concern from the salvage auction pictures was is there any frame damage? Technically, these pieces right here are part of the frame, but what I was worried about is the main frame rail structure. There are 4 rails that come forward on this car, and then a boxed in section at the front that this attaches to. And based on what I can tell, all of that looks to be in pretty good shape. Now, we're gonna have to do some work up here to address all of the other minor issues that we have, but the main structure on the front end of this car is intact, which is a massive sigh of relief. A lot of times when you see these R8s at salvage auction, they are certificates of destruction. They are one-piece aluminum frames. They don't have subframes that bolt and unbolt. They are old school one piece of frame, and therefore if there's frame damage on the car, a lot of insurance companies just total these cars out and don't allow them to get back on the road. Now, that is not the case with this car. This car is a standard salvage title, so it will be able to be retitled again, and based on what I'm seeing, we don't have any major frame concerns. Now, frame concerns aside, I do have concerns. I was hoping that some pieces like the headlight here might be salvageable just with a new lens, but unfortunately this one is the good one and there is lots of damage to the housing. This one, it goes a lot deeper than the housing, so it looks like I'm gonna have to actually pick up the headlights, and those things are a pretty penny. Part of the intrigue with this particular car is the modifications, but also how high of an optioned OEM car it is. This is a V10 Plus. And what that means is that it got a lot of very, very special OEM options. Something like the carbon fiber brakes here that until these 2014 models, the only way that you got it was on the R8 GT. This car, because it is a little bit later generation, it got a lot of special stuff from the GT. Like the carbon ceramics, you have these aerodynamic little kind of dive planes. You have the carbon fiber front spoiler. It does have the carbon fiber housing mirrors, although these are different than the GTs. The bases are different. This car also has the dry carbon fiber R8 GT wing. Now, in the Gen 1s, these are very rare, very expensive. In the Gen 2s, they're a lot more common, and they are not nearly as expensive. But for the Gen 1s, very pricey piece. The interior has some very high option OEM pieces as well, and these seats are massively rare, even though they didn't come in this car from the factory. I guess it's possible that they could have, but I don't think. Now, before I go off on too much of a tangent explaining to you all the reasons why I fell in love with this car based on the salvage auction pictures, let's go ahead and just start diving in and see how deep this damage goes. I'm not used to seeing the front ends on these cars mostly intact. Normally when we buy them, the entire front end is wiped off of them. So it's cool to see the aerodynamics for the front radiator here, the center at least, where it has the ducting that shoots down and takes advantage of the extreme, very flat underside of this car. The under tray did collect that coolant, as well as several broken pieces of plastic that rained down from the damage above. But with it removed, we can get a good look, most importantly, at the frame structure on the bottom side here, where there wasn't a lot of damage underneath, but it never hurts just to give it a second look. And then also this side radiator, which is definitely wet from much higher up than I was anticipating. Maybe there's a mount up there. It's kind of hard to see around the AC line. Maybe it just kind of broke right at the mount there. The side of this center radiator looks to be okay though. So I think, and a key word is I think, we just need a passenger side radiator. Now, we do have some R8 parts in inventory, but as I mentioned earlier, we don't usually buy them with any parts usable in the front end, which means that I don't have anything here for this car. You guys know that that's how we like to do rebuilds. We like to pull parts out of inventory, and that works on a C6 Corvette, for example, but especially a rare trim model like a facelifted 2014 Audi R8, I'm gonna have to go to eBay for that. And this is why eBay is the perfect partner for this project. If you're watching this channel, you probably know that we are sellers on eBay and have been for more than a decade. It is the best spot to go to for new and used OEM and aftermarket parts. And if you use the My Garage feature, you can plug your vehicle in and take advantage of the eBay guaranteed fit, which will verify the parts that you're buying are going to fit your vehicle. And if for some reason they don't, you're protected with the money back guarantee. So I'm going to go ahead, get this radiator ordered, and then we can start taking apart more stuff. I was so confident when I found that fluid on the passenger side that I didn't even think to check the driver, and it looks wet also. Okay. Oh yeah, that mount is completely blown off. You can actually see a hole right there. It's kind of hard to point and hold a flashlight. There is a hole in that radiator. So even though there's not a ton of movement and damage down low in the bumper, it must have been just enough to kind of push them back and break them off. The other thing, this doesn't look like this is leaking at all, but this doesn't look like the center radiator. The center radiator sits behind it. Now this might be added on for the supercharger itself. We're going to want to give that a good look. It has some kind of like gouges in it, but it doesn't look wet like it's losing fluid. I need to figure out what that is. Whoop. Alrighty. It looks like all the lower bolts that hold in the under tray also hold in the bumper, which is why it basically just fell out on me. As mentioned, this is the center radiator here, which still looks to be okay. Essentially, these are daisy chained together, where the feed for the side radiators comes in from the tops, and then it ends up going into this center radiator also. There's a single exit on the top that then feeds in and goes back to the motor in the car. This piece here, again, I'm sticking with the fact that it was added on for the supercharger. You can see it kind of has that braided line there. That line continues right there, wraps around under the steering rack, and without taking anything else apart, you can see it right there and right there heading towards the back of the car. So I think that's an auxiliary system for the supercharger. We definitely need to make sure that that has fluid in it. I think that this thing maybe went under a truck or something along those lines, and that is why there's so much damage up top but very little down low. It must have been just enough to move those radiators around. Now I am going to be keeping everything off of this car, including all the nuts and bolts, until it is completely put back together. But this bumper cover we know is not usable, but I do want to go ahead and get some of these add-ons off of it. I know that I'm going to want to reuse those to put them back on the car. The chances of me buying a bumper that already has those on there is probably slim to none, so we're going to end up transferring these over. Best as I can tell, it looks like these are just held on with two 8mm bolts. Easy enough. The removal on them is extremely easy. The installation should be very, very simple too. Now, getting them in the right spot is going to be the hard part. Not overly graceful, but this is the main piece that we were after. And it's not in exactly the best shape, but if I can reuse this as opposed to buying a new one, for the time being, I think that's going to be my plan of attack. Now, one thing that I have not been overly excited to try to mess with, I've never before messed with a fire suppression system. This is one of the modifications that this car came with. But based on my research, it looks like that essentially you have an electrical connection here with an electrical controller, which is attached to all the buttons. And what this does is if this sends a signal to this has some sort of like little explosive in it that then collapses and releases all of the foam that is in here. So if this is disconnected, I'm pretty sure that I can just pop this fitting off and everything will be contained to this and we won't have any issue, or this is about to go real badly real quickly. Okay, I think that I understood that properly. Okay. Oh. Yeah, that's a whole lot easier. Well, that's not great. We'll deal with this in a little bit. With those pieces removed, it really opens things up so we can see how deep this damage goes. First thing that jumps out at me is this HVAC blower unit. Looks like this is kind of like a side kind of housing that maybe bolts on or bolts off. That's definitely broken too. I'm going to assume that that's probably going to come all as one piece though. It does look like the reservoir for the windshield washer fluid took some damage as well. The reservoir is dry, so I'm going to assume that that is broken somewhere. Over here on this side, the ABS module looks to be untouched. Maybe this bracket is moved around just a little bit. Whatever this is here maybe is a little bit tweaked, but it doesn't look like there's anything overly concerning there. Looks like nothing got to the master cylinder, the brake booster area. And again, more importantly, we get a good look at the frame rails. There's no weird kind of buckles, cracks, nothing. Everything looks pretty darn good. Another thing I'm getting a lot of clarity on is this supercharger system. This looks like it's actually a tank that has the pump attached that is mounted to what's left of this storage compartment. It looks like this line here that comes out of the driver's side of this cooler, as mentioned earlier, I'm going to guess goes right down into the pump and then into here and either back directly into the supercharger or into the reservoir, which makes a little bit more sense. I'm going to guess that this thing is fed from the same same coolant reservoir as the motor, and it's just kind of like tapped in at the top or something, and then this is ultimately what the system uses. So it's still kind of a separate system, but it's one fill point. Or there's another fill point at the back that I just haven't found yet. The damage goes a little bit further towards the firewall than I was anticipating, but all of those components are replaceable and will be pretty easy to find. I hope. Those radiators are already on order, so we're going to go ahead. We will wait for them. In the meantime, I have a healthy list of other parts that I've already figured out that I need. We're going to go ahead, start sourcing them on eBay Motors, get some stuff headed our way. When the radiators show up, we can take this thing for its first test drive. My radiators have arrived. I was able to find 2 complete units, both driver and passenger. So we should have everything that we need from those assemblies, and then I'll have a couple parts that hopefully I'll be able to sell, recoup a couple bucks. In the meantime, I was also able to confirm a few things. I found the fill point for the supercharger setup, and it took virtually no fluid, which tells me that even though this cooler at the front has a little bit of damage, there is no punctures, no holes. It is sealed up, and it will be functional for our purposes. Also, the power steering cooler over here, the level at the reservoir was good, which means that this is not leaking fluid either. And what that means is that once we get these radiators swapped out, all of our fluid levels should be good to go, and we can take this thing for its first test drive. I'm guessing there's supposed to be better access than this on a car that's not wrecked. The hood latch assembly itself is pretty bent up. Obviously the mount is bent up, but the cable looks to maybe be okay. So depending on what configuration I'm able to purchase a hood latch in this assembly, I may need this. So we're gonna hang on to this for the time being. And for anyone that has been questioning how you have an impact that is this significant and you have no airbags that deploy in the interior of the car, this is how right here. Your airbag sensors on the front of this car are right here, and then also right here, and all the damage literally went right above them. So that way we have no airbag deployment, which is going to make this repair much, much more simple. With the radiator off, we get a better look at just that little bit of damage that cost us this entire radiator core. What's curious to me is that both of these are from a 2014 model year, but you can see there's obvious differences in the fan itself. The plugs are exactly the same, but the length of wire is very different. So I assume this takes maybe a more direct route. I guess there was maybe some sort of maybe mid-year change, or this car has upgraded fan units. So one way or another, we are going to try and swap all of this over, and then the only thing that we need from this is the radiator core itself. The actual duct and the AC condenser we're going to be able to resell, because the ones that are on my car are good to go. I think this one's ready to go back on the car. This one, on the other hand, a little bit extra clearance needed on this side. I always like to try and backfill a coolant system whenever I can. It allows you to really just get as much fluid in as possible. We're going to fill this from the reservoir at the back, but we'll go ahead and try and get these radiators filled up as much as possible and get a little bit of head start checking for leaks. We have a few lights on the dash. I'm gonna guess that the check engine light is related to the ambient air temperature sensor at the very front being unplugged. I noticed that the wires were cut on it. Our R8 go-kart has the exact same thing, which is why the check engine light's on, but we'll scan that just to be sure. The traction control we're gonna have to look into. Again, I'm sure probably just because some sensors at the front are missing. Seatbelt should go away when I buckle the seatbelt, and then this thing does have an airbag light, even though no bags are deployed. So that's going to be something that probably a little bit later that's going to come into play. We're going to have to figure out why that's on. As expected, ambient air temperature, first one to come up. Not exactly sure what that one is, but I can look it up real quick. Looks like it's just listed like kind of generically as a drivetrain control code. That means that there's some sort of issue in the PCM. It makes me wonder if it's related to the tune, because VF Engineering, when they put the superchargers on the car, also have a tune that you upload. Yeah, it looks like there's other people on forums talking about seeing this with tuned cars before. I'm not seeing any leaks, and I'm not seeing anything major that is going to keep us from driving this thing. So I think it's time we go ahead and get this hood off, make sure there's nothing else that can fly off, take this thing for a test drive. Straight down.
That does feel way better. That's so much better shifting than the R8 car.
The second that we shifted it, the DCT is just worlds different driving experience than the older clunky R8 that we're used to in the R8 go-kart.
Imagine if that car had this transmission. It'd be 10 times faster.
It's totally different.
It wouldn't look as cool in video though.
Ooh.
This thing sounds awesome too.
That quick little rev that I did in the shop, you could tell that this thing is not quiet. It's in sport mode now, and it's aggressive.
It feels like it's gonna move.
I don't want to go too crazy like right off the bat since I just got it running, but like, geez, yeah, that felt great. Seems to track straight, like it shifts. What gear am I in? Fifth? That's sixth? How many speeds does this thing have?
It's gotta be seven.
Seven. It's got 7 speeds, okay.
I feel like this is almost too easy. You've just taken the front end, I'll put some radiators on. Right now we're driving down the road.
Well, I was just about to comment how natural it feels to drive one that I can't see a hood or anything in front of me, because that's what I'm used to with the go-kart.
Somehow though, this feels much more tight and compact than the go-kart. I don't like having doors on these things. This one feels nice. It feels like a nice car. I've always preferred these to the Lamborghinis. What's it yelling about? Turn signal?
Turn signal, yeah, that's not even attached, so.
I've always preferred these to the Lamborghinis. This just feels nice. The carbon, everything.
I like the downshifts. And it's definitely a completely different power band, which you would expect from a root style supercharger compared to a big turbo setup on it. But the second you hit the gas on this, it wants to go.
That shifting is amazing. Is that full throttle?
So I'm not even used to driving it. When I went to shift into third, I lifted off the gas because I'm so used to doing it with the go-kart. Now, that wasn't even like close to full throttle. That was like 20%. This car's pretty low mileage, 20,000 miles, which is part of the reason why I was expecting it to drive like this, to drive really well. It looked like somebody had spent a lot of money on modifications on it. Usually people don't do that and then not take care of other things on the car. Except for Carrington. Carrington's the only person. So I was expecting it to drive really, really nice, but I am very relieved. My anxiety is going down the more we drive this, that it actually really truly appears to be what I thought it was when I bought this thing, which is not always the case.
Yeah, the downshifts. I would just be downshifting this back and forth. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Just to hear that.
Well, I'm supposed to be using my hand signal since I don't have a front. I'm going to take this as a big W. We are going to head back to the shop, check fluid level. It's giving me like a level on here about the coolant, even though the temperature's fine. And we have several other things to talk about with this car: the interior, some of the modifications, the wheels, because I have something else planned with that also. The further we get into this video, the more excited I get about this car. I love the way that it drives. It is definitely a completely different driving experience, and there's a little bit more damage further back here. Nothing that is overly concerning, but it's going to be more parts that I'm going to have to pick up from eBay Motors. I do, however, have a couple concerns in the interior. A big selling point on this car when I bought it was all of the modifications. And normally something like this GMG roll bar, which is the same roll bar that we have on the Go-Kart R8, and then these extremely rare, I believe these are Euro spec, but there are sets of them in the US. They fit in different Audis, but these ones are specific for the R8 with the embroidery. But after driving it, I don't love them. I am not a small guy, and this is a car that I want to be comfortable. If you guys watched the FD RX-7 build, you saw that I have a different set of seats in that. We built a custom roll bar for it. That's more of a track kind of focused build, so I'm okay with a couple little sacrifices on that car. With this car, I don't want to do it. I want this to be essentially the best daily driver car that I could ever ask for. These seats, they're a little bit tight on my hips. I sit a little bit high in the chassis. I was thinking that maybe if I removed the roll bar, which I don't want in this car anyway. Again, a lot of street use. The last thing that I want is me risking me hitting my head on something if for some reason there is an accident with this car. So I thought maybe with the roll bar removed, I might be able to move them back far enough where it would kind of offset. But after driving it finally, I just don't think that that's the case. Another piece that I am not in love with is this steering wheel. I do love the suede accents and I love the carbon fiber, but what I don't love is the digital display up here, because it's not for an R8. When it powers up and illuminates, it says that it has the S model logo. So I think that maybe this was for like an S5, an S4, something along those lines, and it was put into this car, and the paddles do not work either, which I don't like. So I think ultimately this wheel is going to go away. I don't know exactly what I'm going to replace it with yet, if it's going to be just an OEM one or if I'm going to try to find another, you know, aftermarket or OEM plus style that has some carbon fiber on it, but I don't think that I'm going to be keeping this one here. Everything else in the interior of this car I absolutely love. It is the carbon trim option, and I believe that this diamond stitching is called the executive package, and it flows over into the center console, which is full leather wrapped. The e-brake handle is stitched, and then also the surround for the radio is stitched also. All of this is just beautiful, beautiful additions for this car. So after driving this thing, I think I finally have answered all the questions that I have for this car as far as what parts we need and then also what parts I'm going to be selling. So we're going to be logging on to the eBay Motors app. I'm going to be finding all of these parts that I need, and then I'm also going to be listing a couple of them. So if you have an R8 and you like the roll bar, the steering wheel, the seats, it's going to be available on eBay Motors. The last thing that I need to confirm is that all of the wheels are straight. I didn't feel any weird vibrations when I was driving it. I am not in love with the color of these wheels. It doesn't do anything for this car, so I have plans to powder coat them, but I need to ensure that they are straight. So we need to get those off, put them on the balancer, make sure that they are good to go, and then we can get the last little bit off of this car, the final disassembly, so that way we can start actually rebuilding this thing. That right there, that's a problem. And I didn't just do that, because there is some adhesive that you can see in there that somebody went and kind of faked that out to keep that thing in place. Out of all the things that could have gone wrong on this car, that is not the worst thing at all. I'm not happy about it, but at the same time, we got lucky everywhere else. Well, I didn't get away totally unscathed with this car.
You broke a lug nut?
It was broken. Do you see what's on the end of that?
They glued it?
Yes. Now, I'm not so much worried about the actual balance, because we are going to be removing these tires. They are a little bit old, definitely a little bit used, but they are 2015 date code. So these need to be replaced, especially because they're not really in the best shape. So the balance isn't important, but I want to make sure that the wheels are straight. And this one actually has a little bit of damage to the inner lip, which is not completely uncommon from these auction cars that we get. It happens the way that they move these around with the loaders, but what is important is that everything looks to be very straight on this one. Now we just have to hope the other three are good to go also. The wheels themselves are cosmetically not in the best shape, but as far as being true, every one of these is pretty much straight as an arrow, which is what I was hoping for. The flat black color of these wheels does absolutely nothing for me. It's pretty obvious that the previous owner of the car was going for like that race car type look. I think it ties in with the roll bar that is also kind of a matte finish black, and then the dark colored wheels, which is fine for like a track type car, but for me, this thing's gonna be a street car. I gotta do something to just kind of liven up the look of the car a little bit. We have made a massive amount of progress in this video, figured out everything that I need to order, and I'm going to do that so that first thing in the next video, we can go ahead and start actually rebuilding this thing. All the work that we did to get this thing running, we're about to have to undo it, get everything out of the way so we can get Josh from JCH Weld Fab down here to do some welding on this frame, and then from there, we're gonna be building everything up. So a massive thank you to everyone that has stuck it out, joined me on this journey. This one is very special to me because this is a car that I am going to be keeping. I am looking forward to driving this thing as much as possible. Also, a massive thank you to eBay Motors for sponsoring this project. You guys know that we are sellers on there, so it really is a special relationship to be able to have them involved in the rebuild, since we've been selling with them for more than a decade now. I'm going to get the last little bit of parts off of this thing, and I will see you all back here very, very soon in video number 2, where we're going to get this thing actually put back together.